All right, welcome in. I'm the Kodiak, and I'm here to talk about Nik Bonitto and his rise for the Denver Broncos into being a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, one of the game's very best edge rushers. But before we get into it, I just want to say, leave a like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're not already. You can always follow me on Twitter if you like what I have to say on here, at Kodiak Broncos. We got 2 days before we play the Bengals to pretty much determine our fate for the rest of the season. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. So I'm here to talk about what he was like at Oklahoma before he even got to the NFL. So he was a 4-star prospect out of St. Thomas Aquinas, and there's a lot of St. Thomas Aquinas, so he is from the one down there in Fort Lauderdale. It seems like South Florida is like NFL junior, along with, Texas and all those other places. But there were multiple articles about him being a bit of a head case his freshman year at Oklahoma, and his defensive coordinator said that he wasn't like a bad kid or anything like that. But Nik Bonitto himself said that he was a little bit crazy. So if you have any insight into that, I would love to hear that in the comment section down below, because that sounds pretty interesting. And I don't know if that just meant he was partying a bunch. I don't know if that just meant that he was like lazy with the film study. But it's really insane to think about that now, because I think about Nik Bonitto and he's really developed into, one of the leaders in our locker room. He's one of the, faces of the team now. And he emerged as a leader and he matured mentally in so many ways. I actually think he was a captain his final year at Oklahoma as well. But regardless, he was one of the highest graded PFF pass rushers in college football. I actually think he was the highest graded PFF pass rusher in college football in 20 and 21 when I was looking at an article from Oklahoma, like going back to his like pre-draft scouting report. In 2020 and 2021, I'm pretty sure he was the highest graded pass rusher in PFF. So the things I wanted to highlight based on his time at Oklahoma: 4.5 sacks in 3 games versus Texas. So the reason I wanted to highlight that is because we play the Chiefs defensively as well as anybody does. And a big reason why is because over the past year and a half, Nik Bonitto has really, really shown up against KC. And the fact that he showed up big in those rivalry games against Texas while he was at Oklahoma, that bodes well for how he was going to show up in the rivalry games and the big games in the NFL. And he had a game-stealing interception against Baylor in 2019. So this ability to cover guys and this ability to get picks, this is nothing new. Now, granted, it wasn't really tapped into until this year, and we'll get into that. But yeah, this was pretty cool to see from his pre-draft profile, and it's cool to see the shades and the foreshadowing of what we were going to get in the NFL. Now, the crazy thing about Nik Bonitto is that defensive players' stock tends to fluctuate, and when you have mock draft databases like Grinding the Mocks, and I'm pretty sure the one on the right I have is called NFL Mock Database. Like literally, that's the name. It seemed pretty consistent. Like he didn't experience a steep fall off. Like obviously he dipped into the 3rd round in the middle of like the March 2022 draft process, but ultimately I feel like they were pretty predictive. Every mock draft and every aggregated mock draft, which is what these scatter plots points are, I felt like it was very, very predictive of where he was going to go, and they ended up just nailing it, which is crazy to do for defensive players if they're not like top 10 picks locked in. So yeah, that's kind of crazy to think about. But regardless, this was his NFL draft profile. So he was known for having great athleticism, and we kind of saw this his first 2 years in the NFL, where he had great athleticism, but he was one-dimensional as an edge. He had great speed moves, but A, he needed to develop a power move, and B, he needed to develop a frame. C, he needed to get better on run defense, and he was still learning the game. Like he definitely has taken a step forward on his football IQ as well, and he was commonly mocked to the Broncos because edge was seen as a need at the time. It wasn't that we were lacking guys, it was that we were lacking consistent, impactful guys. And so with Nik Bonitto, 937 relative athletic score, as you can see, everything else is great. And edge is a position that is so heavily reliant on athleticism. You see that he did well in pretty much everything. The only thing that kind of prevents him from being in the upper echelon of NFL edge rushers, and probably what made him drop to the end of the 2nd round in 2022, was the fact that he was 6'3" and 250. And that's not small. Like 6'3", 250 absolutely towers over any regular person. 6'3", 250 absolutely would body me. I'd look like an absolute marshmallow next to Nik Bonitto. But he also benched 22 reps which I believe is 285. Yeah. So his strength, raw strength, compared to other edge rushers relatively, is not that big as well. But everything else, great. Vertical, broad jump, 40-yard dash, 20-yard split, 10-yard split, shuttle, 3-cone, and the shuttle and 3-cone are what you really look for when you're evaluating the edge rushers during combine season. Absolutely fantastic. And relative to all the other NFL players, I think Nik Bonitto, even though he might still be undersized, that doesn't matter because he's now very powerful. He's now, I think, a step quicker, and he is just so darn good. Now, 2022 for Nik Bonitto. So let's actually talk about his time with the Broncos. So he came into a very crowded edge room. We had guys like Bradley Chubb, Randy Gregory, Baron Browning, who had moved from inside linebacker to edge in the 2022 offseason, Jonathon Cooper, and Nik Bonitto. And honestly, if you had told me like a year ago, if you had asked me a year ago or 2 years ago as to which one of these guys would stay and become a mainstay and become our most consistent edge rusher, I would not have picked Nik Bonitto. I wouldn't have picked Chubb or Gregory either, so I probably would have gone with Browning just because the small sample we did see of him rushing the passer at times was absolutely absurd. But Browning, his career was kind of hampered by the fact that he was always injured. And, I actually don't know how he was doing in Arizona. But, yeah, I was just very surprised that Browning is Bonitto is what I thought Browning would be. But when he came in 2022, he was treated more of a redshirt year for him because the Broncos defense was really good that year. Now the offense, different story. But after the Bradley Chubb trade, Randy Gregory was hurt. So Browning, Cooper, and Bonitto were kind of that 3 edge rusher tandem that they were running. And the idea behind drafting Nik Bonitto is you get to use him when you have a lead. You get to use him on like third down packages, and when it's 3rd and 8, you get the other team in an obvious passing situation. You're going to be able to keep the guys healthy, and you can sub in Nik Bonitto. Now, the problem with that is that when you have an offense that is historically bad, which our offense was that year, you never have a lead, and so therefore he never really got the chance to rush the passer because he wasn't good enough to be there on early downs. Like if you guys remember Ejiro Evero as our defensive coordinator, he said in the middle of 2022, somebody asked him, where does Nik Bonitto need to get better? And he said all around. He said that, if a guy is, not as savvy in run defense, that it's not the biggest end of the world because ultimately he still was a developmental project and it was his rookie year and whatnot. But, they can't have you in on early downs. So he finished the year with a minimal impact. All right, so in 2023, he was given more trust this year, and the reason him, Cooper, and Browning got a lot of playing time is because they were relied upon after Randy Gregory got cut. So the year before, Bradley Chubb gets traded. This year, Randy Gregory gets cut, and looking back at that 70-point performance that we gave to Miami, I think a lot of that is due to the very poor play we got from Randy Gregory, and they got him on a crackback block like 5 or 6 times, and then Achane and Mostert would just take those to the house. And Bonitto still really wasn't developed that much as a run defender. And honestly, I was not really that impressed with the front 7 play last year. Despite the 8-sack season, I thought the run defense was not that good. I thought it was very spotty. I thought we were just too weak in the run game. And looking back on it, it's because they got almost nothing from the interior D-line. Jonathan Harris and Mike Purcell, those guys have been addition. It's been addition by subtraction, losing those guys this year and replacing those guys with very versatile defensive linemen like Malcolm Roach and John Franklin Myers as well. And DJ Jones is playing a hell of a lot better, especially because now he's not next to those guys. But Alex Singleton, I thought, was also a huge liability in run defense last year. But everything about the front 7 is playing much better this year. And despite the fact that he had an 8-sack season, I was like, okay, we just need to see more from him. Like, I was happy with the trajectory of guys like Mims and Bonitto, but I was like, we just need to see a tad bit more. And 2024 and beyond, so he worked with a pass rush specialist in the offseason in Florida, and that's helped him become an every down mainstay and a defensive player of the year candidate. No longer do they have to wait until it's like 3rd and 7+ to throw Nik Bonitto out there. No longer do they need to wait or be scared that, they can be exposed on the edge and run it towards Nik Bonitto's way. The opposing offense can just dash it towards his side of the field because he's not getting bullied in run defense anymore. He's an asset in run defense. And he's a defensive player of the year candidate because he is not only one of the game's premier edge rushers now, but he's making game-changing plays every week. He gets that pick six against the Browns. He gets that pick six against the Colts. And it's just really, really cool to see the development of Nik Bonitto, because this is exactly what the Broncos needed. When you're a team that has such little draft capital, and finally everything is going to be undone from trading for Russell Wilson and Sean Payton this offseason, like you are finally going to have a full slew of draft picks. You need guys to step up, because they didn't have a first round pick in 22 or 23. They didn't have second round picks in those drafts either. I mean, they did. They took Nik Bonitto at the end of the second round in 2022, but they didn't have one in 2023 until they traded up for Marvin Mims, and then they didn't have a second round pick either this year because they traded for Sean Payton. So the depth on the defense was not that great. And when the depth isn't good, you need your guys to show out. You need your top stars to show out. And more importantly, Bonitto was kind of seen as like a rotational piece coming into this year. And the best thing about the Broncos this year, aside from watching our rookie quarterback develop, has been the unforeseen development of so many dudes, has been the unforeseen development of Nik Bonitto, of Zach Allen, of just a bunch of other dudes. So I'm really, really happy with how things have turned out for Nik Bonitto. I'm very proud of him because he's one of the leaders on the team now. He bleeds blue and orange, and he wants to be with us for a long time, and I hope we can lock him up for a long time because he has earned it. Cooper got 4 for 60. Oh, man, just wait until you see what Bonitto gets next offseason. So, yeah, that does it for me. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.